This race on the track is women's 50 run. Our lane assignments for our first team. Lane 2, UCF. One deep. 18 participants.
This is America, so everybody is entitled to freedom. All men and women are created equal. But the history of this country, that has not always been true. And so a lot of what has happened in passing laws, and Title IX is one of those laws that, for me, that I call a remedy for a past sin.
Title IX was a law that was founded in 1972. It was used to prevent gender discrimination in any publicly funded group, activity, basically anything, any publicly funded organization. Over time, it's simply become manipulated to just use against athletics. It's used primarily in athletics to prevent women and men from having any sort of unfair advantage. And in the 80s and 70s, it was unfair for women, and that's when you saw a boom in women's participation in sports. And that was great. And it was great because women didn't have the chance to play, and all of a sudden now they had plenty of opportunities to play their sport at the collegiate level.
What happens when you try to make a correction with a law is that I think there's some unintended consequences where folks feel like they are left out of a process.
Do you know how the federal government goes about seeing if a school is in or out of compliance? Have you heard of the three-prong test?
There's 3 prongs to be in compliance with Title IX. One of the prongs is the number of female and male athletes has to match the percentages of the undergrad population.
And here at UCF, it's currently 55% are women and 45% are male. Mm-hmm. And so by law, they have a quota of 55% of the females for the student athletes must be female and 45% be male.
Here at University of Central Florida, we have 6 men's teams and 9 women's teams. We have women's track and field, we have women's rowing, we have women's volleyball, but we don't have any men's teams for any of those sports.
You could say the males are becoming underrepresented because of the law.
The biggest problem with that is that I'm sure that there's interest. I'm sure there's men who want to run track. I'm sure there's men who would love to row for the University of Central Florida. And I know there's plenty of guys that would love to play volleyball for the University of Central Florida. But we can't. And the reason why is Title IX.
There's certainly a trend in this country to see the elimination of a number of men's sports teams in major colleges and universities. Where will that trend go? Will the gap get bigger? Certainly with what we've seen happening, the gap is probably going to get bigger. Where are we losing young men in this process?
Problem with Title IX is that it can be very easy to fall out of compliance. For instance, if all of a sudden you have a 5% increase in female student population, well, now you have 5% of your athletes now have to be female instead. What do? You can't add a women's team usually because the cost of setting up a new team is very expensive, and the easiest thing to do is just cut a men's team.
And it boils down to a choice, and you're driven to the less likable option, which is reduce men's participation so you can get down to this proportionality and equality that we're looking for in Title IX legislation. And of course, when you end up and figure out which sports you're going to fiddle with, obviously those who are participating, it upsets their program quite a bit. There's no doubt about that. Because I think specifically the one that bubbled to the top was when the decision was made to cut men's cross country and track. There's no doubt about that. That was a hurtful decision, but the fact of the matter is that was a place where we could start to fight some of the numbers imbalance. Your other arguments in isolation make perfect sense. Relatively speaking, track is not as an expensive sport as some of the other sports. It would only be 25, 30, 35 guys. The facilities are there, but I've got this big piece of legislation that says you can't do that.
There's countless stories, and they're all the same, that a school is out of compliance, and to be in compliance, they simply cut a men's such and such team, and now they're in compliance. But it says something when, you can go to any school and look at the teams they have, and there's consistently more women's teams. It shows. It shows that the law has taken its course, and now we have less men's teams as a result.
Think about the unfairness of it now, you don't really have a reference point because you haven't lived it or seen it, and you think you may only see the side that seems unfair now and not be able to see as much what good came of it.
All right, I can get pretty emotional about that. A lot of supporters of Title IX say that way back when the law first started, that women didn't have any opportunities. And it was true. Women were discriminated against. There was substantially less opportunities for women to participate at the intercollegiate level. And nowadays, it's reversed. You have substantially more women's teams than you do men's teams. And you constantly get the feeling that you're paying for past crimes. It's not fair. You should, if anything, have the opportunity to play. And to say that we're not going through what they went through back then, I'm pretty sure we are. You have more women going to college than men, more women being able to play in college than you do men. And while that's great, you're overlooking men.
Do you think that's fair?
No, actually, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair that, I don't think it's very fair the way that I guess I'd say that Title IX has been implemented.
The majority becomes the minority, and the minority becomes the majority, but yet many of these laws remain the same. Do I think Title IX is fair? It needed to happen, or the injustices on the other side would have continued to happen. Has it run its course? Is there something else that we could look at? I think so. But I think it's sort of that law sticks there, and that's the way it is.
I think that what we have are some unintended consequences of a well-meaning piece of legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see us backing off the legislation. I just it's hard to back off legislation, and to me, it's the dilemma between what's right and wrong as opposed to what's legal and illegal. We could have a situation here where, from a legislation standpoint, we are following legal, illegal to the letter of law, and for humankind, it may not be really what's right and wrong.